Okay, we are recording.
Cool. So, hello. Good afternoon, Congresswoman and guests and PACT people. My name is Alden Rower, and I'd like to take a minute to introduce the Project for Advancement and Cultural Transformation, or PACT. Our group formed in response to the recent civil unrest and social divides in our country in order to provide ourselves and our peers with a clearer idea of what could be done about issues in our current events. We have some questions that we would like to ask you today, and perhaps you have questions for us as well. Yeah, if you want to take a moment to introduce yourself, or we can jump into questions.
So I'm Debbie Dingell. I'm the member of Congress. Are all of you from the 12th district? Are you from Ann Arbor? And where do you go to school?
We can go around. I used to go to
Yes.
Rudolph Steiner. I'll be a freshman at the U of M this fall.
Oh, good. Why don't you all go around? Just tell me what you're doing.
I go to community high school in Ann Arbor, but I think in the second. But I go to high school in Ann Arbor.
Okay. Which high school?
Community.
Okay, thanks. Who's next?
I'm Michaela. Oh,
You go first, Michaela.
Okay. I'm Michaela, and I go to school at Green Hills School in Ann Arbor.
That's great.
I'm Emma. I'm a senior also at Rudolph Steiner High School.
Good.
Hi, my name is Riju, and I'm going to be a sophomore at Rudolph Steiner High School.
Good.
Hi, my name is Eden. I'm going to be a junior at Rudolph Steiner High School as well.
Good.
I'm Kyla Ivanovich. I'm actually a resident of Georgia, but I recently graduated from Rudolph Steiner of Ann Arbor as well, and now I'm studying as an EMT.
Oh, good. So how did you all connect? Through school? Okay.
Yeah, that's the easiest way to explain it.
Okay. All right. So ask away.
Hi, so I think I'll ask the first question. So my question is, do you agree with the demands for reform or abolition that you have seen, such as 8 Can't Wait or the NAACP demands? If not, why?
So I'm not sure exactly what, when you say it can't wait, are you talking about the issues of race and the how NAACP is, 8 can't wait. Somebody tell me a little more about 8 can't wait.
Riju, do you want to take it, or? Yes. 8 Can't Wait was a social media campaign that went very viral back in June, and it was a list of demands that outlined what could be done in response to recent police brutality. And it was kind of a halfway point between abolition and, keeping the police the way they have been in recent times. I can find the exact guidelines if that would be helpful, but it was mostly a series of steps.
So this is mostly what has been put into the George Floyd bill as I'm looking at these. And I voted for the George Floyd bill. I think, that's what I'm trying to, I start to take my mind and put it where the action has. So after the George Floyd killing, and I marched in with many people. I marched in Ann Arbor, marched in Ypsi. I did 20 marches in those 3 weeks. Throughout my community, and they were in places downriver that don't normally have them. And I'm going to tell you, I feel very strongly about this, and I've become one of the members that's talking about this the most. I think defund the police is misleading language. And I think the fact of the matter is that if you are a young, Black, I normally say man, because I think that Black men tend to get profiled more than Black women, but Black women do too. Or a young white man, you will be instantly treated differently by law enforcement. That's a fact of life. And people don't understand that. And that we're at a crossroads in this country. We do have systematic racism, and we need to address that. But I also think we have to be very careful that not all law enforcement is bad. And I'm very concerned Donald Trump is going to make this into a wedge issue. And the fact of the matter is, I went to, and in most of the instances, the marches, vigils, walks, what they occurred as you all paid attention in different forms, the police chiefs of the local communities participated in those events. There were a few communities that did not occur in. And I think we very much in the George Floyd bill have to, we need to ban chokeholds. We need to make sure the cameras are on. And in the case of George Floyd, there have been 18 complaints already filed against the policeman that murdered George Floyd. And there needs to be a system that tracks these complaints, keeps them accountable. You can't go from one police department to another and not be held accountable. But having said that, not all law enforcement's bad. And in many of our smaller communities, they're the heart and souls. We had, I live in Dearborn. We had a young 26-year-old Arab man whose parents still live in Dearborn. He had 2 children. He was a policeman in Toledo, and he was shot and killed on the 4th of July when he was called to a Home Depot parking lot because somebody was inebriated. And during Ramadan this year, he wrote a letter to his family and said, if you're reading this, I died. And I want you to know why I went into law enforcement. And I wanted to make my community better. I wanted to fight evil. I wanted to protect people in my community. And too often, we're making things either or conversations. In Wisconsin this week, we've seen another shooting. I just was on a phone call before this with some of my other colleagues, and the police in Wisconsin have yet to give any explanation or description of what happened or why it happened. So all we have is a video of another shooting with a man's 3 children in the car. And that it doesn't make sense, and it's put communities on edges. But I'm not going to let Donald Trump go on television and say we support rioting, we support looting, we have a problem. We're at a crossroads. Systematic racism does exist in this country. But we can also appreciate the men and women that fight to keep us safe. And what we need is leaders that can have complicated discussions, not pour kerosene on a fire and continue to try to divide people with fear and hatred. So that's how I feel about that.
Thank you.
Congresswoman, I think you touched on this a little bit earlier about defunding the police, but is it seen as a valid option within the House? Or I know you said it may be misleading, but is it seen as a valid option or something that could be?
So it depends what you mean by defund the police. Even Joe Biden has been very clear that he does not support defund the police. We're not going to replace police departments. There needs to be, what's happening right now? So this is what I'm worried about. The ads that are on television that say push 1 for domestic abuse, push 2 for murder, push 3 for robbery, and nobody's available to help you for 5 days because of defund the police. And I truly had a senior who called me 3 weeks ago because she saw something on TV when it was an ad, but she didn't realize it, that a senior was calling for help because someone was trying to break into her apartment. And when she called the police, they said, there's no one here to help you. That's not going to happen. But do we need to put additional resources into, what's happened to our policemen and to your teachers, among other things? They've become social workers. I mean, I do a lot of work with domestic abuse. Those are the worst calls for a policeman or policewoman to answer. They're dangerous, and they're dangerous for everybody involved. And would it be good to have more tools out there to help and diffuse those situations, yes. But you also want to be really careful because another person in some of those very volatile situations, and by the way, I've been there. I've been in a volatile situation where somebody who wasn't skilled and didn't know what they're doing, they could have ended up getting hurt and more people could have been hurt. So we need to put, John Dingell eliminated mental health in the state. We need more resources for mental health. We need more resources for social services. But, you know, so our law enforcement does domestic abuse cases. During this pandemic, the COVID, I've had a wellness call a week or a wellness check call a week of someone who I'm worried is suicidal or could be a threat to themselves, who goes and does them, the law enforcement. We answer to veterans calls. They've helped create veterans courts where we get people with post-traumatic stress whose behavior it's stress. So they don't put them in jail. They're parts of our community and they care. And quite frankly, there is an increase in violence in our communities. And I'm not going to let Donald Trump go on television, as he did last night, and try to say it's all Democratic cities and Democratic local officials don't care. There are challenges, but we got to work together. Why are there challenges? Why is gun violence up in small cities and large cities? Because people are scared, they're anxious, they're stressed, they need money. It's a variety of issues. It's complex and it's not simple. So do we believe we need to put more money into community policing? Absolutely. But so I think Jim Clyburn, Karen Bass is chair of the CBC. Jim Clyburn is the ranking African-American in the Congress. They've said defund the police is misleading. But we need to give them more resources for support services to keep them better educated. But we're not going to eliminate law enforcement.
Thank you so much for that very thorough answer. You mentioned the George Floyd bill, and I kind of interpreted that as something kind of being in the past. That's a piece of legislation that's done and it's been voted.
But it's also got most of the issues that are in your 8 were in the House.
Yeah, yeah. So because that's in the past, what are you continuing to work on this issue going forward? And if you are, what's in the works? What can we
Well, we haven't passed. We
look out
passed
for?
the House, but it needs to pass in the Senate. And I'm very focused on having conversations as a community that brings people together. We need to have some uncomfortable discussions. And a lot of people avoid uncomfortable discussions. Whites don't want to be called racist. They don't want to see what some of the community or some of the issues are that are leading to it. And we need to have some uncomfortable conversations. I've never run away from them. I chaired Michigan's affirmative action campaign when it was on the ballot because there were people fighting affirmative action in Michigan and we lost. I put together the most diverse coalition we've seen in this state. I even got the cardinal, who was cardinal at the time, the archbishop, to join it. I got church groups and common cause and CEOs, and we lost. And I've had, these are tough, difficult, not pleasant, threatening conversations at times. I have had death threats. And I think I'm at a point in my life that I'm not afraid to have the conversations because we're not going to fix our problems if we don't bring people together.
Cool, thank you. Mary Margaret, I think this is your question. Number 4.
How has your work changed since we got a Democratic governor and switched to a Republican president?
Well, I think this country, I'm more focused on, it's been great to have Gretchen as governor, and I think she's been a very effective leader during COVID and not afraid to make tough and difficult decisions that aren't always popular, but save lives. But I think that Donald Trump as president has divided this nation with fear and hatred. And I worry about what's happening to this country. I'm worried about the fundamental pillars of our Constitution. I'm worried about freedom of speech. I'm worried about freedom of religion. I'm worried about freedom of the press. I'm worried about due process. And when I was your age, I learned about all of those and was on automatic pilot and didn't take any of them for granted and didn't even understand what freedom of speech was. Freedom of speech means you can burn the flag and not go to jail. I love that flag. I don't want to see anybody burn the flag, but in this country, you have that freedom of speech. You don't have to. And Donald Trump is threatening the very cores of our democracy, and it means I have to work much, much harder. That's how my life has changed.
Thank you. Another question we have is more towards the educational section. So I was wondering, what influence does Congress have on the educational requirements in Michigan, including like public or private or charter schools?
So I assume you're talking at like the high school, the K through 12 level.
Yes.
Most of those are state decisions, but the federal government can support them. I mean, Betsy DeVos has tried to put more money into charter schools, but I'm going to tell you that public education is the most important thing that any young person has, and it's the great equalizer, and everyone deserves to have a right to a good, sound, strong education, which means that we need to invest in strong public school systems so that everybody has that equal opportunity. So I'm not somebody that supports private schools, government funding of private schools. I think we need to invest in a strong public school system. The federal government supports the schools, the states by giving them money and setting some guidelines, and then it also does a lot to support university and K through 12 and Pell Grants, etc. But public education is in what happens at school systems, setting requirements, setting what the academic achievements are going to be, the tests that you've got to pass, tends to be more of a state issue.
I have a follow-up to something along those lines. So I don't know if the, like, where you work has heard about this, but there's been a recent issue at our local school, Pioneer, of a lot of racial injustice happening at that school. Has there been any talk about that in the Senate, or has that gotten and reached people farther than Michigan?
So I only saw it this week, that a complaint had been filed at the Civil Rights Commission. So no, I doubt them. I don't even know if Gary Peters or Debbie Stabenow has heard about it. Again, it's a state issue in terms of oversight of the school systems and the court systems. But as a federal official, I still very much care about it. I've asked questions. I do think due process matters, but it sounds like there are enough people that this has been a systematic problem. And when people have talked about one of the teachers, there has not been attention paid for it. So people like me can ask questions that show school officials that I am paying attention. And I think we need to have broader community conversations, which is something that I'm pushing throughout the district, so that we really have conversations about race. And it's sort of the same about sexual harassment, where for years they didn't do anything about this for women. And you just had to put up with it or you'd lose your job. I mean, that for me was just a fact of reality, but we don't have to put up with it anymore. So we have to have conversations, and then we've got to educate people what we find offensive and what's not okay.
My next question is, what is the state of Michigan's or the federal government's role in actually providing technology to remote learning families during COVID that cannot afford said technology, especially during COVID, but even in general?
So again, it's a school system issue that we need to make sure that everybody's on equal footing, so that it's a district issue as to whether people have the computers, the iPads, or the technology. But there is a problem, which is think 2/3 of the state does not have access to broadband. And it's not only in the rural areas, but there are urban areas that do not have good broadband. We have introduced a bill in the Congress, and it's part of an infrastructure bill as well, that will, and this is the Congress's responsibility, is we need broadband, and we need to force the telecommunications company that it needs to be installed so that every American, no matter where you live, has access to broadband and has that technology. So we're pushing very hard for that. That's our role. And Washington County has terrible access, and I'm very focused on it. Not where you would expect that to be, but it is the case.
Yes, thank you. So the politics that we as young people are exposed to seems very polarized and uncompromising. Do you find the same to be true in your day-to-day work with your colleagues?
So I refuse to be. I mean, I think that one of the, and I, by the way, think social media is like one of the worst things that's happened, because it's something that was supposed to bring people together and interconnect. And I think it's a place that bullying takes place. I think you don't develop relationships. I think you all don't talk to each other enough. I think there are real problems because of social media. I think you got to work with everybody. I was criticized in my campaign for being bipartisan and working across the aisle, and said, I'm not like Debbie Dingell. I don't work with Republicans. That doesn't, I do. And last week I was at the Gerald Ford Library with Fred Upton and another Republican member of Congress, talking about civility and talking about the need to work together for, I mean, we're Americans first. We're not Republicans or Democrats. So I was at the Gerald Ford School, and the library, and quite frankly, I'm on the board of the Gerald Ford Library, and I'm on the board of the Gerald Ford School, and I'm really proud of it. Those are, you know, after Gerald Ford, who's Republican president, but I'm very, very honored to know the Ford family, to work with them, and to be on those boards. And on Sunday night, I was on MSNBC with Fred Upton on Casey Hunt, talking about the need for more bipartisanship, for people to be civil. And I'm part of a group called Problem Solvers, which is 25 Dems and 25 Republicans, all working together. So I think we're not going to solve the nation's problems with far left or far right. We're going to solve them by working together.
Cool, thank you. I think we have 2 more questions.
Okay.
And do you still have to leave at 3:30?
I do,
Exactly.
unfortunately.
Okay, cool.
One of those days.
Yeah.
I haven't been off the phone since 6:30.
Oh boy. Well, we won't keep you any longer. Are you doing anything specifically to get the votes of the youth? Are you targeting?
Yeah, I meet with anybody whenever anybody asks me. I try to meet with young people, and I try to go to the schools, and I'm on camp. I mean, I don't do it to, actually, if anybody knows me, I don't do it to get your votes. I do it to talk to you, to listen to you, to hear what you think, to get your input. I try to be on campus every week during the, when life's normal, which COVID's not. And I come home, as soon as that last round's done, I'm the first person out the door on the plane to come home. But I try to be in a union hall every weekend. I try to be in a school every weekend. I try to be on one of the campuses every weekend. I really try to listen, to work with you on projects. What do you need? So I try very much. Young people matter to me. I want to meet with you. I want to talk to you. I want to encourage you. I want to hire you. I want to do 1,000 things. So when they asked me if I'd meet with you, I was like, sure, I want to.
Cool, thank you. Rishu, go ahead and ask your question, and then we'll ask our final.
So my question was, do you have any advice for groups like us who are fighting for social justice? Just in general, any advice?
Well, I think find the issues that you care about where you think you can make a difference. You all clearly care about race issues. Why don't you, I mean, you're in your school, and I don't know if anybody's a pioneer, but you know, organize a discussion or a forum with the young people at other schools. It's hard right now because of COVID, because you can't do things you normally do. You could do a Zoom town hall to talk about race in Ann Arbor or race in Washtenaw County. How do we sensitize people to how somebody feels, what it's like to be a young Black person driving a car, and that you're afraid that you might get pulled over and stopped. Educate. I mean, you can do many things, and you can help lead the way on having some conversations about tough issues that other people are afraid to have. You probably aren't. So that's one way to really do it. You know, reach out to your elected officials, make your voices heard like you're doing with me. And, you know, do your local city council, your state reps, your state senators, see if they'll meet with you too on, you know, do those kinds of things.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you so much. So we'd like to reciprocate a little bit and ask, what can we do to help you?
You're making a difference, care enough to be involved. That's how, I mean, you would guys obviously are working together and you care about these issues. I want to get people having conversations. I don't want to let people keep dividing us with fear and hatred. So stand up and be heard. Fight back. Bring community together. We need more of that, not less of it. Develop relationships. Maintain them, nurture them. Stand up to bullying. Do something nice for somebody. A little act of kindness can make all the difference in somebody's day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that's all of our questions, and I think that's all of our time, but thank you so much for talking to us today.
Well, and thank you guys for caring and being on, and I love being with you, and call me anytime.
We will, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Take
Thanks
care.
very much. Bye-bye.